This right here. Yo, how vibes to you guys out there? So today, you have your bro Truth and
Bro,
bro
acceptance
Flow.
flow.
So how vibes today? We're gonna talk about what is the underworld, and we're gonna do this Astro rerun and have some fun. So let's get straight into it.
Hey, what's up, everybody? It's your boy Astro Solsin. Welcome back to the channel. In this episode, I want to go ahead and talk about the meaning of the underworld and what it actually is, because a lot of people they misunderstand either what the underworld is, or they misinterpret, or they've been, taught by somebody that it's something different. So I'm gonna go ahead and get into it and explain it. Now, the underworld isn't necessarily this place that you go to, because a lot of people believe that when you're in the underworld, you're like in this new place, and there's demons around and goblins and trolls, and and all that type of stuff. Although that stuff could possibly be around, it's not because you're necessarily in the underworld, in a physical underworld place. The underworld takes place in the mind. It doesn't take place in some other reality somewhere else. It takes place in the mind. However, it's a different dimension of the mind. It's a different reality of the mind. And I talk about this a lot of times, how like when you go into your dreams, we call it the dream realms, right? It's like another realm, but it's contained within your mind. It's not like you're going somewhere else. Even an astral projection, a lot of people believe that astral projection is that you're actually like leaving your body and going somewhere, when that's not really the case. What's really taking place is you're in this dimension of the mind that creates a replica in real time of this reality. And a lot of people don't understand that. And I talk about this in other videos, so I'm not going to go into explaining all that right now. You can dig through the videos. I know there's a lot of them, but um, there's a lot of information there. Also on the website at reprogramthematrix.com, I'll have a link in the description. I go into it some more there too. But basically, when you're going into the underworld, it's a dimension of your mind. You see, when we talk about consciousness and raising your vibration and raising up in awareness and all that type of stuff, we're not talking about, you switching to this new reality, but switching a place in your mind, switching a position in your mind that creates a different reality within the reality that's already here. You see, so when you're in the underworld, it means you're in this lower, you know, um, what people could consider negative consciousness. And because of the way that your mind is calibrated at the moment, you're in this underworld and you're seeing this underworld. You're seeing things from an underworld perspective. So because you're seeing things from that perspective, you make choices based off of that perspective, and those choices can likely end up bad, choices that lead to more underworld type activity in your life. And you might say, "Oh, I don't know what's going on, all this bad stuff is happening to me, and you may not realize that the choices that you are making are leading you into these bad situations. You know, sometimes people say things like, "Oh, I don't know why this happened at this place," and it's like, well, you already knew that going to that place wasn't the best place to go to. So, of course, something bad could happen there. And it's the same thing when you're making choices. If you're making these bad choices and then something bad happens in your life, you can't say, "Oh, it's because I'm in this underworld place and everything is bad and negative." You might have took place in manifesting that into your life. You see, we can't be blaming everybody else for everything that goes on in our life, because some people, they want to blame everybody. They don't want to take any responsibility, but then they'll take responsibility for the positive things. They'll take responsibility for the manifestations and stuff like, "Oh, I manifested that," but they don't want to say they manifested this negativity. You get what I'm saying? So the underworld is a place inside of your mind, basically. And when you shift to the underworld, you make choices based off of that shift in perception, and then you get certain results based off of those choices that you're making. Now, when you're in the upper world, when you're in a higher stage of consciousness, or when your vibration is raising up, now you're perceiving things differently than you would when you're perceiving things in the underworld. Now you're making different choices that are actually creating positive results in your life. You get what I'm saying? And it doesn't mean that adversity or something like that won't come your way, because it's just like the yin and yang, how there's a little bit of the yin in the yang and a little bit of yang in the yin. You see, so even when you're in the upper world, there's going to be some underworld activities that go on. However, because you're seeing things through a different lens, you're not focused on all of that activity. You're able to see past that and not get involved with it, and you keep moving forward in your life. When you're in the underworld, yes, there could be some upper world activity that goes on. You could be somebody that watched my video, for example. You could be in a very bad place. You could be very depressed about life, hating people, and all this type of stuff, trying to isolate yourself from everybody. But then you see my video, and it sparks, something a little higher in you, right? Although you're in the underworld. So it's not that anything doesn't cross over. It's just when you have this certain perspective, it's like your focus is on a certain place. And sometimes you go into the underworld because one of those, you could have been in the upper world, and then one of those issues that came into your life that was part of the crossover, dealing with some of the underworld activities came into your life, that has caused a reaction in you to now drop down in consciousness. You see, maybe you're in a relationship, you got cheated on or something like that, and then after that, you notice your life starts to become way more reckless. You start making a bunch of bad decisions, and then next thing you know, your thought process is different. You're going about things differently. Like some people, they'll be in that situation where they got cheated on, and then they go out and have sex with a bunch of people and end up getting pregnant, or end up getting somebody pregnant, and they know it was a dumb decision, and that it wasn't supposed to happen that way in their mind, of course, but it was all based off of that perspective that you had, and you started being irrational and stuff, right? So, and that's just an example. This can go into a whole bunch of different things. But the underworld is a perception, it's a stage of consciousness. And the way I map it out on the website, reprogramthematrix.com, I have a video on there where I map out the 7 stages of consciousness in the underworld and the 7 stages of consciousness in the upper world. And it's basically like a mirror of each other. You see, just like when we talk about, or actually when we um, read music, right? Anybody that reads sheet music, you notice how there's the treble clef and there's the bass clef, right? And I got those tattooed on my hands back from my music days. Anybody that could see them, but there's the treble clef and the bass clef. And the funny thing, I want to mention this too about these tattoos. Like a lot of the tattoos I had got them when I wasn't at the consciousness I'm at right now. And at the time, I didn't realize the significance of some of these meanings, like, the treble clef and the bass clef. At the time, I was thinking it was just music, but it was actually something that would help wake me up later. It was like if you ever seen the movie Memento, how he had the tattoos to remind himself. And then I was looking at these one day, and this is where I started to connect certain dots with the upper world and the underworld, how it was a mirror of each other. Because when we get into the sheet music, when it comes to the bass, there's seven different notes in the bass, right? Depending on, other factors. But to keep it simple, there's 7 different notes. It goes A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and then there's the treble clef. And when you play treble, it has A, B, C, D, E, F, G, but it's on a higher octave. So what happens in this reality is, and this is why music can be so important, and why a lot of people start waking up spiritually, that are interested in playing music and singing and even dancing and all that type of stuff, is that basically there's these 7 stages of consciousness, but then they repeat themselves in a higher octave. So when you're in the underworld, you're in the lower octave. When you're in the upper world, you're in the higher octave. And depending on which note you're on depends on the perception that you have at that stage. So there's 7 stages in the underworld, 7 stages in the upper world. A lot of people reside on the first stage of either the underworld or the upper world. And basically that first stage is that you're not really aware of things, you're not really like conscious. You might be self-aware and know who you are and stuff like that on a physical level, but you don't know who you are on a mental level. You don't know who you are on a spiritual level. So you're really unaware of things. You're not just unaware of certain parts of yourself, you're unaware of things outside of you. You're just on the program. And those first stages on both sides are basically, not really being conscious, but you might be not conscious in the underworld or conscious in the upper world, or not conscious in the upper world. And both of those stages, no matter if it's in the upper world or underworld, they get manipulated and programmed, and they're basically part of the masses that gets used by these programs and things that are put out there. So they're not really awake on any level. Now, the further you go down in stages in the underworld, the more somebody is aware that they're in the underworld, and they enjoy it more. So there's people that are living at the the bottomless pit, in the depths of the underworld, in that darkness, and they enjoy it. They're aware of it and they love it and they like to hurt people and cause chaos and stuff in people's life. And then as you go higher up in the upper world, you start to gain more consciousness and you become more aware and you realize you're in the upper world and you enjoy it. You like it. Because there's people out there that they don't really enjoy love. When you try to show them love, they actually, reject it. They try to close themselves off. They don't want to let any of that love in, you see. Although they don't realize
I
that's
see
what
what you
they're
say.
truly seeking out, but they try to seek it out through an underworld perspective, which usually gets them caught up in trouble because the deep.
Yeah, I want to say like rejecting love. That's something I even deal with sometimes because it depends. Like he's saying, like where your consciousness is and where like are you looking at things from a lower perspective or a higher perspective? So, and that's also like a big program I'm noticing, even with like newer music and stuff. They have like the sad program, and people who just like reject love, but they also want love, but they also are looking at love in the wrong place, like that underworld love and that not like that true self love. You know what I'm talking about? They're just
Mm-hmm.
looking at it, looking at love as a relationship, and that's not a bad thing. But of course, self loving yourself first is definitely the route to go. That's the only way to go. Not the only
Mm-hmm.
way, but it really is the only way. But
Mm. Yeah, I really like what you said too about how like you really have to love yourself and how people in the upper world are gonna love themselves more because when we talk about the underworld and the underworld mentality, because the underworld is a mindset, we're talking about the ego. We're talking about people who are in their ego. And when you're in the ego, it deals with, pride, it deals with envy, it deals with
mm-hmm.
lust, it deals with these different, things that separate people. It creates this division. And once you get to a certain point in the underworld, because Astro, he was talking about how there's different frequencies, right? When you get to the lower ends of the underworld, there is no trust there is no love, there's no family type of frequency. So it's like that right there should give you a reason to have a desire to go into the upper world, because at that point you're going to receive more of that connection, you're going to receive an environment that actually allows for you to grow, because your mindset, a big part of your mindset is being able to put yourself in the right environment. I don't know if you guys heard me last time because I could have been on mute, but what I was saying was that if you look at a child, if and you observe the sources of information that the child is picking up on, it could be TV, it could be their parents, it could be their peers. Like if they're picking up on underworld information, like that information can program them for the rest of their life. And if they're not aware of the concept of their mindset and how they're able to change their mindset, where they actually love themselves, they can change their mindset where they have more faith in themselves and more confidence in themselves versus having low self-esteem, self-doubt, and stuff like that. There's people who aren't aware that they have that option, but by you gaining the desire to go into the upper world, that gives you the option to really become your fullest self, your in your highest potential. Let's get back to
Deeper you go down into the underworld, there is no real friends there. There is nobody that can have your back. This is why a lot of people that, are very wealthy, people that are celebrities and stuff that have a bunch of money and all this type of stuff, they don't trust anybody because, everybody they're associated with, they're all backstabbers. They'll all get over on somebody, and, and steal and lie and cheat. So there's no trust down there. There is no real friendship. It's everybody's out for themselves. You know, it's a dog eat dog world down there. But as you move up, it becomes more selfless. Of course, you still have, you know, your personal needs and things like that, but you're more selfless. You're more giving, you're more forgiving, and you're more, loving basically. So when I talk about the underworld, I'm not talking about some other place you go to or something like that. I'm talking about right here, right now. But depending on the lens or the perspective or the consciousness or vibration that you're at, depends on how you're going to view it. And depending on how you view it, depends on, what choices you're going to make. It depends
Yeah,
on how you're going to
that's what I'm
navigate it.
saying.
And that's going to depend on what results you get.
This also reminds me of the movie City of God. Like how in everybody's mindset is just like totally underworld, and it's a definitely like a dog eat dog world.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's, I'm not gonna spoil anything, but if you haven't seen that movie, definitely see that movie. But one of the main characters, he's more so like on the higher, like the upper world. I'd say like unconscious in the upper world, and sometimes he dips in the unconscious in the underworld. But everybody else in the movie is pretty much like lower than him, like in the underworld conscious wise. But eventually, like he makes the choices, even though it's really hard, and he deals with a lot of adversity. But he gets out of that situation, and he turns up. So I'm not gonna say anymore. Just watch the movie.
Yeah, it's a really intense movie, and it goes to show like if you have a will, then there's a way, and if you want to make your way into the upper world, like you have that option. Um, and even like I like what you said too, how like some people are on the fence, where it's like there's times in their life where they're in the underworld and then they take a vacation into they're in the upper world and then they take a vacation into the underworld because
Yeah.
they're not aware and conscious, so they get pulled back in to their old ways. But to avoid being on the fence, like you have to direct more of your energy, more of your time, and be really dedicated, devoted, and disciplined to reaching your highest potential.
How about that?
That's going to depend on, the reaction that you get in this matrix system. So other people might be talking about all this other stuff, but in reality, this is what it is. And even if you go back into some of these good books and stuff, some of these religious books, this is what they're talking about. But a lot of people, they're not able to really see between the lines. They're not able to really see the codes and the symbols and stuff in the ancient writings. So they take it all the wrong way. But when you're able to see it for what it really is, you realize this is what they're talking about. Everything Astro's talking about right now is the truth, and you experience this all the time. Plenty of you out there, you have good lives and stuff, but you experience the underworld because sometimes you dip down into the underworld and you stay there for a bit, but because you don't really like it, you start to raise up a bit. But some people like it, you know. It's like they go on a vacation down into the underworld and they extend their stay. So it's not some other separate place. The underworld and the upper world take place inside of you. Just like when they talk about heaven and hell. Hell and heaven aren't, these physical places you go to. It's already inside of you. You just make the decision on what notes you want to play. You get what I'm saying? But that's pretty much it. Thanks for watching. Peace in and out with love, my highest vibrations, and always my gratitude.
That was definitely a very turned up video for sure. Hope you guys got a lot of information out of that. I really like what he said too. When you start really getting into the upper world and your perception starts to change, you start to see information differently. You start to perceive your reality differently. So when he was talking about like these religious books and stuff like that, if you're in the underworld, you may not get all of the information that was really meant to be put out from the books. But when you start really raising up and changing your perspective, then you start to really connect the dots and understand the message on a deeper level, because you start to gain more of that experience. You start to gain more of that 2020 perspective, where you're not only just aware of the underworld, but you also start to become aware of the upper world, where you're starting to see the dark and the light. But do you want to add anything, or are you good?
I'm good, bro.
You good?
Yeah.
All right. How about guys?
Our lives.